Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show, Monday, November 17th. Thanksgiving only 1 week away. Hard to believe. We're wrapping up Week 11. We're looking ahead to Week 12. We're doing so through a waiver wire lens. Kyle's article will be live on the site. If not now, then immediately after this is over. On my Sunday Aftermath column, also live on the site where I tackle a lot of the same topics that we'll be talking about today. But Kyle, let's begin this week the way we always do. Who is the waiver wire edition of the week as we head into Week 12? Only 3 weeks left in the fantasy regular season?
Yeah, in most fantasy regular seasons, I'd say. So 12, 13, 14. This is a good week for waivers. I think there are a lot of contenders to be the waiver wire ad of the week. I'm going to go with Emmanuel Wilson. By far not the highest scorer of Week 11 from the waiver wire ads, but I think the one who's going to add to your fantasy roster the most going forward. The reports on Josh Jacobs are optimistic in the sense of season-ending injury has been ruled out, and he will return sooner rather than later. As we approach the actual NFL playoffs, to me, that could mean still 2 to 3, 4 games missed. You talk about we're approaching the actual fantasy playoffs. I think we could get 2 or 3 starts heading into the fantasy playoffs out of Emmanuel Wilson, who dominated the work. 71% of the snaps saw, I believe it was 14 carries to 1 for Cris Brooks in the absence of of Josh Jacobs last week. He just looks kind of like a bell cow running back on an offense that's almost perfect for bell cow running backs because they are good and frustratingly run heavy. Like, they can move the ball with the pass when they want to, and they don't really want to very often. And they choose to run the ball a frustrating amount, which is perfect for the backup now starting running back. I also think Sean Tucker and Michael Wilson were great candidates for this as well. I just think you're locking yourselves in for the most fantasy points if you go Emmanuel Wilson.
Yeah, we got into this a little bit on the Sunday Night Recap show. Check that out if you've not done so already, where, again, only 3 weeks left in the fantasy regular season. Famous last words, injuries do mount as the season goes on, but there aren't going to be many more, if any more, opportunities to get kind of like a plug-and-play guy off the waiver wire. And Emmanuel Wilson, fairly long track record at this point. It's not like he's that good, but he's a plug-and-play replacement for Josh Jacobs. He's going to be a top 24 option based on workload in fantasy, maybe not production. But these opportunities are just going to be fewer and farther between. And you might not like the situation, but you got to add Emmanuel Wilson as the regular season draws nigh. All right, we got a lot of questions coming in, looking like some good ones. Here we go. Stuntman Chuck here every week. First one, what do we do with Michael Wilson, who went, quote, insano mode on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers? I keep saying, Kyle, I'm making a reference that's going to date me. Too many of our young viewers won't know what it means. But the Cardinals went 2012 Detroit Lions mode. Just the emptiest passing volume you'll ever see. But it's classic check clears in fantasy. Do not care at all. What do we do with Michael Wilson, who went nuts when Marvin Harrison Jr. comes back? Marvin Harrison Jr. get the feeling out at least one more week. Appendicitis can frequently be a month-long ordeal. And is Brissett going to keep making the matchup machine go burr? Just give us your thoughts on this Cardinals offense right now.
You laid it out. It's not ever going to look particularly pretty with the way they play because Jacoby Brissett is out there to make the fantasy points go burr. He has frankly played his worst 2 games of the year the moment they put Kyler on IR. But again, for fantasy purposes, his worst game of the year is 258 yards and 2 scores. He set the completions record in a game last week. Truly, I knew he was putting up fantasy stats, but I'm working on other stuff. And that Schefter tweet, I mean, plenty of people tweeted it. I saw it from Schefter, hits the timeline, and I am just dumbfounded. And then Aditya Fuldiori, who I think he covered that game. Maybe he was just
he did. We've begun to refer to him as our Cardinals beat writer.
He had a lot of Cardinals games.
A lot of Cardinals games.
He dropped that nugget in that it was the most receiving yards for a player in a game this year. Michael Wilson, I believe, was 15 for 183, if I remember correctly. I think as long as MHJ remains out, the fantasy points will go burr. They're playing peak Joe Flacco ball in Arizona. I do think once MHJ comes back, there's a reason Marvin Harrison Jr. was frustrating, but still doing stuff. Still a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. And Michael Wilson was not even a rosterable player for the first 2.5 months of the year. It frankly probably just returns to that once he's back. But I agree. I don't think he's back this week. Next week is probably a coin flip or something like that.
And, not to pile on Kyler, but easy to forget, Michael Wilson had some hype early in his career where day 2 prospect, but he was a day 2 prospect a lot of people were interested in, kind of for a variety of reasons, big guy out on the boundary, and it just did not happen. Of course, with Kyler, and kind of like almost literally instantly happening when he's out. Does Kyler, we knew he had limitations, just looking like maybe they were even more severe than we thought. We have two questions here on the situation in Atlanta. First, Stevie said he asked Denny the week I was not here, does Drake London and Kirk Cousins just refuse to play together? Boy, do they not like playing together. Drake London out for week 12. Darnell Mooney totally face planted the last time Drake London was sidelined. But then the other question too about the Falcons, Kirk Cousins has been bad enough this year, Kyle. Do we worry about Bijan with Kirk Cousins under center? So give us your thoughts on El Kirko taking over from Michael Penix, what it might mean for Bijan Robinson, and if Darnell Mooney could maybe finally this time it counts.
I don't know, man. For Darnell Mooney, I guess we'll work backwards from smallest to largest. Darnell Mooney, to me, frankly, the issue is not even getting involved. He's had games where he gets 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 targets, and in a bunch of those games, he catches specifically one pass. Coming into this past week 11, he caught one pass in back-to-back games. He tripled that total with 3 in week 11, but again, it was another game where he was extremely inefficient, had another costly drop in that game. It's a skill issue right now, and it's a skill issue that he has not had before. It's something that maybe he can turn around. We're at 3 months of football at this point. I don't think he is going to turn it around. Drake London is so target dominant that whenever he plays next, I will say he'll be a wide receiver 1, even if it's with Kirk Cousins. It might be less of a wide receiver 1 with Kirk Cousins, but it's the difference between him being the wide receiver 3 or 4 overall and the wide receiver 8, 9, 10 overall. Kind of what we're doing with Justin Jefferson right now, where even as bad as the quarterback play is, you do want to lean on talent a bit. And also, as much as I hate on Kirk Cousins, he's better than JJ McCarthy. So the quarterback play still has a higher floor. Bijan, the team's going to run a reckless amount. Both of the running backs, I don't want to say they're better off because of this, but they are more insulated because the worse the quarterback play gets, it's just going to mean more and more and more carries. And for all of Kirk Cousins' faults at this point in his career, he's protected the ball relatively well. He's not taking sacks and taking any sacks in week 11. He's not throwing interceptions. He's just going to be checking it down like he did. When was his last start? It's like week 8 or 9. He was just checking down to Kyle Pitts, taking free 5 yards whenever he got it and not doing anything stupid.
I will say in Kirk Cousins, the play is degraded to the point, and he's getting old to the point too. I wonder if he even finishes the season under center. Penix, it seems like he's going to miss at least 4 games on IR. I wouldn't be shocked if Kirk Cousins didn't even finish the season. Also, just seems to be a lot of bad blood between the Falcons and Kirk Cousins. So that could be an ever-evolving quarterback situation. Ever-evolving situation, by the way, is my light. I wish I didn't. I appear translucent today. I tried to fix it, and I can't do that. So I'm down bad. Alex P, down really bad at quarterback. Who are the best 14-team streamer options this week, Kyle? Said he might have to start Matt Ryan. It's a rough week at quarterback. Jacoby Brissett is out there, under 50% rostered on Yahoo. Bryce Young is out there against the 49ers. Trevor Lawrence against the Arizona Cardinals. Trevor, never been good, of course. And then I had Justin Fields against the Baltimore Ravens, but it's not Justin Fields. It's Tyrod Taylor. 14-team league. You might be looking at Tyrod's season. Actually, I heard he goes by Tyrod again. Tyrod. Who is your 14-team quarterback streamer of the week?
I mean, Tyrod's clearly better than Tyrod, right? Like, choose whatever name you
objectively.
want. Objectively.
And just listen, I know families insist on difficult pronunciations. My own family does that with Daugherty. Everyone wants to say Daugherty. Nothing still is worse than Achane. Achane is an objectively great last name.
Absolutely.
Achane is not. But Tyrod is out there. Who are we streaming?
Not Tyrod. I mean, you can. He was like okay in his previous 1 start and like 2 halves-ish of football. But the answer, I mean, it was your first answer because it's the very obvious correct answer. Just let Jacoby Brissett throw 40 times a game, pick up 260 yards. Don't watch the football games, but accept the fact that you banked 250 and 2 touchdowns and be happy with it. Bryce, I believe he gets the 49ers this week.
He does.
In a game that, while like pivotal and probably a loss for the Panthers, I mean, we just saw the 49ers give up the NFL record for completions in a game. In part, like, they're the perfect combo because their offense is really good. I know they've played sort of some up and down games. They have not had their starting quarterback for most of the year. But even with Mac Jones, it was very clear that Shanny can scheme up a good offense with any quarterback under center. They put up a lot of points, and the defense has been really poor this year. That is the shootout recipe. They're doing like Dallas light kind of things in terms of how it plays out for fantasy. I think Bryce is at least going to get a lot of volume. He's going to pepper his top wide receiver with targets. They're going to move the ball. Again, they're probably going to lose, but it's a good recipe for fantasy. Outside of that, Tyler Shuck is one that maybe there's some long-term development there as well. He had a really good game before their week 11 bye. 280, I believe, something yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been really good throwing intermediate, and that kind of makes sense because his tight end is a former wide receiver and a clear seam stretcher, and his top wide receiver is like the air yards king, just picking up chunk gain after chunk gain. It's a decent recipe for fantasy. I still think he's much more in that QB2 range, but if we're talking down bad streamers or super flex QB2s, I think Shuck's worth an ad.
Yeah, Tyler Shuck, he went Rattler mode. And we were worried that he would not go Rattler mode and just keep his guys relevant. I was very surprised the degree to which he kept Chris Olave and Juwan Johnson relevant. And task maybe got easier with Rashid Shaheed gone, not fighting for targets. Not easier in that Rashid Shaheed commanded a lot of defensive attention. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised from what we saw from Tyler Shuck heading into that Saints bye. Laplandish here every week. They're wondering, Vrabel cannot possibly go back to Ramondre Stevenson, right? Why will Vrabel instantly go back to Ramondre Stevenson this week against the Cincinnati Bengals? Kyle, no. I mean, Travion, even in the strange, twisted world of the NFL, I don't think they're going to put the Travion genie all the way back in the bottle. But let's say Ramondre comes back this week, for this smash spot with the Bengals. What kind of backfield touch allocation are you projecting for the Patriots?
I think I did this with the Chuba Hubbard Rico Dowdle split, and I was like, it's going to be a committee, but we should side with talent. And the Panthers were like, no, it's not. No, we won't. Actually, it was a committee, to be fair. But they eventually did correct their ways. Credit to Dave Canales. But in those first 2 games back, Chuba Hubbard drew the start in both of his first 2 starts after missing, I think it was 2 weeks, even though Rico Dowdle, both while he was out and while they were sharing the field, was clearly the better back. A committee is, I think, the baseline, regardless of how good the past 2 games have been for TreVeyon Henderson. I do lean that in the first game back from multi-week injury, we should have Ramondre on the bottom half of the committee. But do not be surprised if he gets 16 carries to TreVeyon's 12. I think maybe the thing that can close the gap is TreVeyon's pass catching and the fact that TreVeyon will just be more efficient on the ground, not no matter what, but in general, over a large sample. He's just a better between the tackles runner. So I'm going to say that rank TreVeyon higher, expect a committee, have some amount of acceptance of pain coming, because it can happen. We've seen it happen. It happened with Monangai and Swift too. Monangai fully back up again. He's just not a relevant fantasy player. He's actually scored in back-to-back weeks, but he is a distant RB2.
Everyone was posting. So I had several tweets about TreVeyon Henderson Thursday evening, as everyone did who watched that game. And there was just the tenor of the replies was like, so what? They're going to go back to Ramondre immediately. And I think you hit an important point there, that it's not just that he hit the home runs. It's that even because it's not like, because lots of their replies too, like he didn't even have a good game, like 3.2 yards per carry or whatever. Like, brother, that's what Ramondre does every game. Like, TreVeyon not only did the Ramondre thing a little bit better, he actually has long run upside, which Ramondre Stevenson just does not have. And yeah, I agree with basically everything you say. Even if Ramondre's back this week, TreVeyon's not falling outside the top 30. I'm probably still keeping him in the top 24. But we'll see what happens. We got to wait for an injury report to really start fretting about that one or not. A lot of questions. Going to try to get to all of them. Going a little bit out of order. That's what I find in the flow. Armando is saying, how do we look at Tirico and McMillan now? Finally, you and I said last week, like, he keeps having that floor. And like I said, eventually when there's a floor, you have a ceiling day. This didn't seem terribly likely, especially against the Falcons defense that had actually been elite against the pass. He goes off, though. Armando saying, too, tell the bank examiner that benching him wasn't that crazy in week 11, all right? Like, it wasn't that crazy. Again, he hadn't had spiked any weeks. Falcons were a good matchup. But Tirico finally goes off. Are we adjusting, or are we just still kind of keeping him in the low-end wide receiver 2 ranks? It is still Bryce Young. It is still the Panthers. What do you say, Kyle? Oh, you're muted, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak.
His explosion, which, as we talked about, was so overdue. We talked about it on Thursday, like you said, is guys who see 30% of their team's targets and like half of the air yards. They really deserve we almost called it to a T too. I think I quite literally called it like 8, 140 and 1, and it was very close to that. It was like 130 and 2 on the Thursday show. They tend to be able to do that over a large sample of games. The problem is this past week, it took a Panthers franchise record passing yards from Bryce Young to get him there, which is kind of what he needs given how poor, not even how poor, just how conservative the offense has been. Like I said, though, they probably won't get to play conservative football this week. And this is something that, as much as I was lamenting the fact that he never had a ceiling game up until last week on the Thursday show, I should have been more vocal about, because you mentioned it earlier, you were talking about Tyler Warren, but it was guys who can consistently get 5 catches for 60 yards. That is like their floor or their median projection. The ceiling will come. For certain players, it will take longer for the ceiling to show up because, T-Mac's not in a particularly fun offense for fantasy, but we should be playing them for the floor and knowing that the ceiling will come over the long run. And, I was still starting him everywhere because he's awesome. But we should remember that even if the ceiling hasn't happened in an 8-game sample, it could be the 9th game, it could be the 10th game, and we could get another one this coming week. So absolutely keep playing him. Still set your baseline expectation at 6 for 80 and probably no touchdowns.
I'd say 4 for 60, not to be too bearish there. But
I think he's like 6th in the NFL in receiving yards right now.
He might be. I mean, because every week he goes 4 for 60. But we need, again, and 2, just because he had a ceiling game last week doesn't mean, well, he's not going to have one this week. This is the way sequencing goes sometimes. Yeah. Like, man, this guy didn't do anything for 8 or 9 weeks. Surely he can't have back-to-back explosive games.
Totally.
But he's facing a team that just allowed the biggest receiving effort of the year to Michael Wilson. A lot of that had to do with comeback game script. But we're feeling – we never felt bad about Tirico. We are feeling much better, at least finally seeing the upside outcome demonstrated. Germs – here, will Courtland Sutton ever get back to the Courtland Sutton way? Or is Bo Nix capping him? Something about a tight end question followed there. Tell me about Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton, though, Kyle.
I mean, so I guess it's not just Courtland Sutton, though. I think it's very clear, I've said this for like a few weeks, is that Troy Franklin, while not the most efficient receiver specifically, because if anyone's being capped, it's arguably Troy Franklin, because these two cannot connect on their intermediate and deep shots to save their lives. So to me, it is the 1-2 combo of Bo Nix. His play is just stagnating, is what I'd call it. He's not playing horrific football. He just has not made any progress really since 2024, and teams are adjusting to him and forcing him to become a very tepid check down and run first quarterback, a player who is still not taking sacks, not making big turnovers, but they just cannot find any of the explosive plays. And combo that with Troy Franklin just straight up overtaking Courtland Sutton in terms of who's this team's number one receiver. To me, that is the combo that makes Courtland Sutton at this point probably just a wide receiver 3.
It's crazy. I don't know how you can rank him in the top 24 at this point. Again, I've always viewed him for rankings purposes as like the poor man's Mike Evans, where like the floor is kind of frustratingly low, but he's not usually having floor weeks. A lot of nice downfield catches, like a touchdown every other game. He did that for several years in a row. He's just not doing it right now for all the reasons you laid out. The Broncos offense, also just more target competition than he's had before. So I think it will remain frustrating for Courtland Sutton down the stretch. David is in need of a tight end streamer. He's lost faith in Harold Fannin Jr. I hate to say it, but same. Britton Strange is out there. Hunter Henry's out there. AJ Barner is out there. 3 names he threw out. A guy's still under 50% roster, by the way. Dalton Schultz, Colston Loveland, Juwan Johnson. They're going to be rostered in like more serious leagues, quote unquote. Mason Taylor also out there with now Tyrod Taylor starting this week. From that batch of names, who would you tell David to add at tight end?
From this batch, I would just go.
You could throw in another name too if you had someone from your column.
I'll start with this batch. I think the column you mentioned them, so I won't go too deep into him. I would go Hunter Henry here. He's got the maybe MVP frontrunner as his quarterback, and the team does not have a clear wide receiver 1. Like it should be Stephon Diggs, but he doesn't run all the routes, and his production is very spotty, in part because they just don't play him every single snap. So that lends itself to the occasional spike week for him. I think Barner is a decent bet, but so much of what he did last week, to me, I guess yesterday, struck me as we're getting destroyed. Let's try and check down our way back into this game for him. He caught, I believe it was 10 for 70, if I remember correctly. Season highs in route rate, season highs in target shares, both of which are good. You want him on the field. You want him earning targets. I wouldn't expect that to happen again. So I'd go Hunter Henry of this bunch. If you have other options that haven't been named, you pointed out, Juwan Johnson right now is, I believe, the tight end 7. He is the tight end 7 in PPR and is available in over half of all Yahoo leagues. And this isn't from like 1 or 2 individual spike weeks. This is from consistently just stacking up 19, 20% target share games, which he's been doing since week 1. There's no change in his usage. He's just consistently a good low-end tight end 1. And Dalton Schultz is almost the same way. His production's been a little more up and down, but as of recently, Davis Mills, even CJ Stroud before Davis Mills went down, are just peppering him with layup, not super high value for NFL purposes, but great for PPR purposes type of targets. He's the tight end 9 on the season.
Jay, I'm just going to answer this one really quickly. Should he ride out the Jamar Chase roller coaster or try to trade him for something more? He's really not been that inconsistent, and I don't think you could get more for Jamar Chase. Frustrating. Believe me, he hurt me bad yesterday, but no worries whatsoever about Jamar Chase. Could be suspended. I guess I'm worried about that for week 12, but that's the only thing I'm really worried about there. Ezra, here every week. Sorry, Ezra, I missed a few questions earlier. Wondering about MHJ or Chris Olave rest of season. We're probably leaning Chris Olave. He's frankly been better, and we don't know the situation in the MHJ appendicitis, but you have a finer point to put on that, Kyle?
No. I mean, the appendicitis thing alone is we have, like you said, 3 games left in the fantasy regular season. Assuming you're not 9-1 or coming up on like 10-1 at this point, can't really be thinking about like, well, what's the week 17 look like? Maybe with Jacoby Brissett playing this way, the weekly ceiling is higher for Marv. I think that's at least worth considering. You can't really consider that when we don't think Marv is going to play this week, and next week is probably a coin flip. After that, we think he's pretty likely to return. We don't have that type of timeline horizon, but also, to your point, agnostic of that sort of micro analysis, Chris Olave has just been better.
He's just been better, and he's not only been better most of the year. Olave has been better of late than Olave was early in the season. So things have just been trending in the right way for a guy who's had a very frustrating career and had been having a frustrating 2025. Metal Mask 3 wants to put a fine point on the Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson conversation, where basically Jacobs is out. The Packers are obsessed with the run, like in an almost like desperate sense. Like that's just their entire identity. But do we think they will finally adjust with Josh Jacobs probably out for week 12? Are we going to see tripling down on the run with Emmanuel Wilson, or do you finally expect more passes for Jordan Love and company? I'll look up who they're playing while you're talking.
Yeah, I mean, in my heart, I want to say, like, I've said this many times. Is Jordan
playing
Love,
the Vikings, by the way?
No, they're just going to run more. I have zero faith in JJ McCarthy's version of this offense being able to put up points against the Packers. Packers defense has not lived up to that early season standard they set, especially when they opened the year shutting down the Lions. They still have a good pass rush, and that's something that we think JJ McCarthy is going to consistently struggle against. This is going to be a low-scoring affair where they're excited to ride Emmanuel Wilson. No fun. Sorry.
So first off, help Jay. Jay's back. The bank examiner is going through his trash. That same thing's happened here. I don't know what you think you're going to find. A banana peel? You think I'm going to put my statements in the trash? You're dreaming. Those are getting shredded, all right? But Jay, he's wondering if we should drop Quentin Johnson over his bye week to speculate on someone like Sean Tucker or Kayshon Boutte or even the Eagles defense. Basically, it's the kind of year where you have to make tough drop decisions because buys, injuries, like you just can't keep stashing luxuries forever. I would say Quentin Johnston, despite the shaky recent play, despite the fact that the Chargers' downfield passing attacks kind of suffering without Joe Alt because they just can't protect her as long, I don't really view Quentin Johnston as someone you could drop. But do you agree?
I think he's like vaguely adjacent to droppable, but that's in particular because this is a good week. Last week, when we had probably the worst waiver run of the year, if you tuned in last week and tuned in again this week, God bless you, because last week was maybe not the most fun waiver wire show. This week, I think, is a really good one. This week, I don't know. To me, rest of season, who could be more impactful to your team? If you told me it was Emmanuel Wilson, like, dude, I have one FFPC co-managed team where we trotted out Nick Chubb again this week. We cannot find another player to replace our backfield tandem that is currently Dave Montgomery and Nick Chubb. We're blowing it all on Emmanuel Wilson, and we'll have contingent bids on Sean Tucker, and we'll have contingent bids on actually we already have Devin Singletary, so we're just nice like that. But I would drop, because we need running back, I would drop Quentin Johnson for those players, in part because of what you exactly just said. I don't think Quentin Johnson all of a sudden became bad over the past month. It's just they cannot protect Justin Herbert, and he's just going to keep checking it down to Keenan, to Ladd, to Aronde Gadsden. The prime player who's been hurt by this is the most explosive of the bunch of QJ. So I would like to not drop him, but specifically if you need running back this week, I would say he is in that sense droppable. Like you said, it's a hard decisions kind of week.
What I would say about Quentin Johnson too, he's the classic kind of player where clearly in a vacuum, he should be rostered. In most 12-team leagues, Quentin Johnston should not be on the waiver wire. On the other hand, he's the classic If I drop Quentin Johnston, is this really going to come back to haunt me? The answer is not 1,000% no. Like it could.
There will be one week where you feel it haunted you for sure.
But more often than not, you'll probably not be haunted by dropping Quentin Johnston. But in a vacuum, he should be rostered. David wondering, Judkins, ellipses, thoughts. Judkins have been very, very consistent. He had kind of been immune to this awful Bengals offensive environment the past 2 weeks. That has not been the case. Things have been bad. They're getting worse. We don't know if it's Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders for week 12. Can we keep the faith on Quinshon Judkins, or is he kind of becoming a shaky RB2 start, Kyle?
Shaky, I think, is fair. I probably called him shaky before. He does not run all the routes. He doesn't even really threaten to approach half the routes. He has one game with a double-digit target share percent this year. He also sees almost every single carry. That is, to me, the almost perfect, like that typifies the boom-bust RB2, and the bust weeks are going to be all the more frequent when his team is just pathetic. They're terrible, and it doesn't matter who they start. Like, I think Dylan Gabriel is probably better on a down-to-down basis. Shedeur just looked like a deer in headlights out there. But Dylan Gabriel, on any individual play, has offered zero ceiling. Like, you are praying he completes a 5-yard pass. And Shedeur's kind of the opposite. Like, he looks like he has a little bit more of a live arm. I mean, it's not that hard. Dylan Gabriel does not have a live arm. He looks like he has a little bit more of a lively arm than Dylan Gabriel. But, like, I don't know, a third of his dropbacks are end in sacks. It's probably more like a fifth or something like that.
It's
but he's going to have one of the highest sack
too many is the answer. Too many.
Way too many. And he's already putting himself in harm's way. Like, he took one really hard hit in this in his relief of Dylan Gabriel where he was shaken up. It looks like that's going to be a part of his game going forward. So I don't know, worst offense in the NFL where you only get 2 of 3 potential downs. Very shaky RB2. If we were ranking him outside the top 24 backs in 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised, not as an indictment of his talent, but as a direct indictment of the Browns.
Judkins earlier this season, I said he was the kind of running back who just got so many carries. He seemed like the rare guy where it didn't even matter if he was in a bad offensive environment. Like things like the final Colin Kaepernick 49ers season come to mind. Like the team was bad, but they're running no matter what. I said that about Judkins, but this rarely is that true. And yeah, I guess I'm actually not surprised that that point ended up being wrong. Like no one can outrun the law forever, basically, so to speak, on that. KJ Frederick, Jalen Coker, a name that's always on like deeper league players' minds. He was drafted a lot in the summer. Then he got hurt, of course, began the year in injured reserve. Had a pretty decent day in the 448-yard Bryce Young explosion yesterday, but required a literal Panthers franchise record number of yards for Coker to finally get going. Do we think Jalen Coker might be someone worth looking at in the waiver wire this week, Kyle? If they can't get Michael Wilson, KJ is wondering.
No, I think there are probably still better bets to make than him. Last week, he saw a 10% target share. We did have Xavier Legette got dinged up at the end of that game. He didn't play like a handful of snaps in overtime. There weren't many overtime snaps for them. So maybe there's a chance he is elevated to the number 2 role this week. And, you know, I talked about how good of a fantasy environment this week's game could be for the Panthers, but I think it's contingent on Legette being ruled out entirely before Sunday's game. And even then, it's a player who just, I mean, his season high in fantasy points came last week and it was 9. Like, I know he hasn't played he's only played like 5 or 6 games, but he's just not earning targets right now. And I'm not 100% sure that he will start earning targets just because Xavier Legette is out. Xavier Legette, like I was giving him his props earlier in the show. He's not that big of a roadblock. So if you can't overtake Xavier Legette, I do think it's a bit of a you issue for Coker.
Yeah, Legette, they're both rostered under 50% in most formats of fantasy, most services. I'd probably still just rather take a flyer on Legette instead of Jalen Coker. Yeah, you hate to see it. You like to see a fantasy folk hero come through, but not quite there for Jalen Coker. J Ram's wondering who's the better lottery ticket, Bashal Tutin, the aforementioned Legette, Sean Tucker, or a fringe tight end. We'll ignore the fringe tight end part. On Sean Tucker, I think he will probably still keep mixing in for 6 to 8 weekly carries, but that's his absolute ceiling. If Bucky Irving's back, we'll isolate it to Bashal Tutin or Legette. Both of them are banged up. Like Tutin, we were finally getting like the Tutin takeover, quote unquote. And the Tutin takeover was just an even snap share. But him and Etienne, they were basically rotating snaps, rotating touches. So very unfortunate late in the game. Bashal Tutin suffers an ankle injury. Both these guys are banged up. Doesn't seem to be long term for either. Who would you rather take a flyer on, though? Bashal Tutin or Xavier Legette?
Oh, Tutin by a country mile. Before Tutin injured his ankle, I believe he had a 15 to 12 carries lead over Travis Etienne. Tutin hasn't been anything special this year, but I do think given the way Etienne has generally kind of played basically ever since the first month of the season, which is up and down, still breaking tackles, but just doesn't seem to have that next year, that home run hitting gear that he had in the first month. I think a committee makes sense for this team to both get their rookie that they spent a decent amount of draft capital on Tootin more involved, but to try and keep Travis Etienne fresh for what is potentially a playoff push. They're not making a run, but they are going to be in the playoff picture through the end of the season. So I think Tootin has probably forced himself into a committee role, and it would not shock me if he ends up being the number one back and Travis Etienne is playing on passing downs. They're trying to get him in space, get him explosive looks, but they're not jamming him between the tackles going forward. And Tootin, I believe, told reporters after the game that he's fine. Obviously, we'll probably see him on the injury report. It still could be a reason.
Players also always claim they're fine.
They also do, yeah.
And they always have post-game like adrenaline. So
yep.
Don't take him necessarily at his word. But I am much more excited about adding Tootin. Couldn't agree more. And it was something, it's always noteworthy when something that clearly needs to be happening finally does happen.
Yep.
And like it was just abundantly clear to anyone watching any Jacksonville Jaguars football that he needed a bigger role. And it looked like it was good for Travis Etienne yesterday. It seemed to help Travis Etienne a little bit because he's miscast as that every down player. Here's the question Kyle did not want you to ask. We're going to force him to answer though. How are we feeling with Jamison Williams moving forward? 2 games with Dan Campbell as the play caller. He legitimately spiked a week, especially by his standards in week 10. Didn't spike a week against the Eagles. He did lead the team in receiving. He did do his thing, scoring a 40-yard touchdown. He then also did his thing. Got a very costly penalty. So that was quite something, Jamo. How do we feel about Jamo with 2 games as Dan Campbell's play caller, though, Kyle?
I mean, better. It is even this past week, which wasn't quite as good as week 10, still better than you did for the first 2 months of the year. I will note, though, like on 2 fronts, his usage is good but not great. He still saw a sub 20% target share in week 11. He was targeted on a really poor 16% of his routes. That's exactly in line with where he was pre-Dan Campbell play calling. He saw a good, not elite, but a good 33% of the team's air yards. That is, again, exactly in line with his season-long averages. To me, we are just returning to the role is not that much different as measured by the high-level target shares, targets, air yards type of stuff. But they are getting him the ball in space more than they ever were in the first 2 months of the year. And he's the rare spike play, but not spike week player. He has still never had 25 half PPR points in a game. But last year, he had a ton of like 18, 19, 20, 21 points because he was almost a lock every single week for 3 20-yard catches, like putting together what is already like 7 to 8 points just on his 3 big plays that he was almost banking every week. But as a player who rarely ever sees a 25% target share in a game, that's how you get spike weeks, is you see the ball 10 times. Even if you're Michael Wilson, if you're able to go out there and get 15 freaking catches, if you're able to go out there and get a lot of catches, that's how you truly hit those spike weeks. Whereas Jamo is the spike play floor-based player, and he had not been that all year. I think he is absolutely back to that player. I still think he's going to struggle to put up like 25 points in a game, which he hasn't done ever. But I do think he's going to succeed at putting up a 12-point floor far more often than he did in the first 2 months.
I'm going to handle this one from Nadav real quick. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Just wondering what to do with Drake London. Hold or try to sell? And if so, for who? First off, hasn't the trade deadline passed in most leagues? Maybe not. I think this week actually might be the trade deadline. I feel like I would just hold because what are you going to get in like a panic sell-off of Drake London? Or no, actually, you probably actually should just sell for whatever you can get. I don't know why I just did a total 180. But whenever you get an uncertain injury situation and the guy's quarterback has gone down,
it's late in the year in a team that's probably going to be.
Yeah, that strikes me as sell for whatever you can get, actually. Yeah.
What do you think you can get?
I have no idea. I mean, a wide receiver 3, a low end RB2. Maybe you could get RJ Harvey for Drake London right now. You're going to get a question mark is what you're going to get. I feel like. Maybe you could get Chris Olave, like a really, really good
That's outcome. A good one. No one likes Chris Olave as much as this guy right here. I like that one.
That might be. So it's going to be hard. I wouldn't just give him away, but if you can get a starter, let's say that. If you can get someone you know will be in your lineup, then maybe you should do that. I don't know. Maybe BTJ could be a Drake London trade target. Kyle Dvorchak. KJ is wondering what should realistic expectations be for Brian Thomas Jr. the rest of the season. He almost returned last week. It seemed like stands to reason he'll be back for week 12. But Jacoby Myers did take over as the number 1 receiver against the Chargers. They're trying to hide Trevor Lawrence the best they can. It's not easy to do because they don't have an elite running game. They have a good defense, not an elite defense. But what should realistic expectations be for a guy who kind of got like a mental reset at the very least with whatever ankle, with his ankle injury? What are we thinking for BTJ down the stretch?
I do feel like whatever he's dealing with is relatively appropriate because he dealt with the phantom wrist injury early in the year. It was clearly a shoulder injury that was bothering him at one point. Now, in this sense, it is quite literally the ankle injury, but I'm sure like his shoulder's not 100% or whatever. So I agree. He's not just dealing with one thing. I would say maybe put him in that Chris Olave, Tetero McMillan range of your team is forced to feed you the ball. They have no other choice. Is it going to be pretty every week? No, like there have been games where McMillan is wide open multiple times and Bryce doesn't hit him. There have been games where Chris Olave is open deep and he had one or two drops too that were really crucial, big drops from Spencer Rattler. But on the whole, if you're going to stack up 30% target shares, there's not much I can do other than be like, volume is. Like you're a top 20 fantasy wide receiver. And that's under the assumption that he does not look like rookie year Brian Thomas Jr., which I think at this point, 11 weeks into the season, he hasn't played particularly well. Probably can't hold him to that standard. But we can still hold him to the standard of earning a lot of targets, in particular because Travis Hunter is done for the year.
Okay, I'm going to Elias, a loyal viewer, but we can't spend a ton of time on these two names here. But we got to answer Elias' question for him. He scooped Jaden Higgins for a kickoff, but he still needs more receiver help. Xavier Legette and Luther Burden are out there. Who would you prioritize? And a lot of people have these kind of conundrums in deeper leagues where the wires is picked clean. Who do you prefer between Legette and Luther Burden?
Oh, it's Burden. I mean, look, I like I said, it looks like Legette is capable of every few weeks popping for a spike game, but there is a roll up for grabs, and Luther Burden does appear to be taking it. Like Rome Odunze, I don't want to say he's not the team's number one or he's miscast as that role, but he's certainly not the superstar we thought we had over the first month. There is room for, I think, other players to succeed. DJ Moore is not doing that this year. I don't know if it's an offensive design, if it's a buy-in thing, or maybe he just doesn't have the juice anymore. But something is going on. Probably all three of those things to some degree.
It's all above. Yeah, I mean, he's the Monty Python gif / scene on. Wow, yet another new injury for DJ Moore, huh? And yet another game appearance for DJ Moore. He absolutely refuses to sit and get healthy.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it too. But because of all that, I do think, and because last week, as in week 10, Olamide Zaccheaus had just a horrific game. They basically benched him for week 11. Luther Burden got up to a season high 61% of the routes, a season high in target share as well. Not elite target earning volume and didn't run every route, but he clearly is taking the next step in earning the coach's favor. And I think it's very possible by the end of the year, he overtakes a struggling DJ Moore and is his team's true wide receiver too. And he's been elite whenever he's been on the field this year. In parts, they scheme up fun stuff for him when he's on the field. But just do more of that. If you're going to put him on the field more, keep scheming him more touches. So to me, it's very clearly Burden because he has this talent-based ceiling that Legette just hasn't shown over 1 3/4 seasons, where maybe there's some hope for Legette to continue to take like the Quentin Johnston type of steps. But I think we're still a year away from him being year 3 Quentin Johnston in that sense.
Olamide Zaccheaus bench. There's still justice in America. Do you have anything to add to your Rome Odunze answer? Because Lab Landish is wondering what's the state of Rome Odunze. One of the most frustrating players in fantasy football this year, Kyle.
Yeah, I still think he's good. I still think there are worlds in which he kind of sustains that superstardom that he had over the first month. Those worlds just required Caleb to be a more accurate passer. And Caleb has done a lot to improve his game year over year. Part of that is Ben Johnson. Part of that is Caleb just playing better football. But the accuracy has not been the case. And I mean, last week, he saw a very understandable 21% target share. Not an elite number, but you can score fantasy points on 21% of the targets. PFF charted a third of his targets as catchable. 1 out of every 3 targets he saw were actually able to be converted to fantasy points. And that assumes he catches all of them. So to me, it's very much the role is not quite as good as we thought it was, but also the quarterback is not as good as we thought it was. And that's really what is pushing him. Like, he's still a wide receiver too, I think, but these box scores suck, man.
And they've been happening, and it's been a really soft stretch of the Bears' schedule. Maybe that's actually working against Rome Odunze because they've been able to run more than they otherwise. They've been able to run as much as they would like. They've been controlling games probably more than they expected. The Bears' schedule does stiffen significantly down the stretch. So I don't know, maybe that equals more Caleb and Rome Odunze hero ball connections, but he's just like a classic. He's more like Jameson Williams than you ever wanted to believe. I'll say that. Not you, the general you. and yet it's a volatile wide receiver too for Rome Odunze. Kind of a bad outcome based on how he's producing to begin the year, but not an awful outcome like based on his ADP or things like that. So Rome, we'll see what happens. It wasn't built in the day. Christian Bautista is wondering, is the Emeka Egbuka hype over? Eric Smolsky was throwing a little cold water on Egbuka. He's had a lot of floor weeks. He did have a ceiling game in week 10, though, Kyle. Chris Godwin coming back this week would maybe almost be good for Emeka Egbuka. I feel like actually give defenses something else to think about. What is your state of the Emeka Egbuka right now?
I saw 35% of the targets. He ran quite literally 100% of the routes. They did not take him off the field for a single passing play. They used him strangely as just like exclusively underneath stuff. They just didn't have an explosive passing game this past week. But to me, a rookie wide receiver who's been spiking weeks throughout the year, sees 35% of the targets. I'm not going to complain. Only 9 fantasy points. That is frustrating. But do we think he doesn't have a high ceiling? Like you said, he had a spike week the week before. He was the wide receiver 2 overall in week 10. So we probably were, I know for a fact we were traded to running a bit hot on touchdowns specifically in that first month. That has understandably regressed. He's not going to score like 1 out of every 8 or 9 of his targets, but he is dominating targets now way more than he even did in the first month of the season. He had like 2 games in his first 6 games with a target share over 22%. He's had in his past 4 games, 23, 35, 30, and 35. These are alpha star numbers, and the fantasy points haven't quite followed. I think they will. That's just how that stuff works.
I agree. I just think he's a follow the numbers guy. The production will be back. That's a frustrating game that we play fantasy football, but really not particularly worried about Emeka Egbuka. And again, I'm hoping Chris Godwin coming back maybe is actually good. And maybe the target share dips down a little, but he gets higher quality targets because he's not getting blanketed, maybe bracket. I don't know if they've been bracketing him. Maybe they haven't been bracketing him yet. But does someone else give the defense something to think about? I'll answer this one from J Ram. Wondering if we'd roster 2 defenses. In Dynasty for a playoff team. I don't know about Dynasty. In general, though, like some experts try to condemn stuff like never use 2 roster spots on defenses. You should probably never use 2 roster spots on kickers, I'll say. But defenses, it's like, what's a better use of your roster spot when you're playing the week-to-week game in the fantasy playoffs? Like a spare wide receiver 5, a spare RB4, or a second defense that has an elite matchup the following week. Situation 2 where you don't have to waste waiver wire money or priority on a defense. I'm all about rostering 2 defenses if you think that is the best utilization of your roster spots. And I think really honestly, frequently that time. I
feel like Dynasty maybe would make more sense too. And like, if you have 40 roster spots or 30 roster spots, even 25 roster spots, like who would you like? I've been holding on to Tyler Johnson for 5 years. I'm not letting him go for a defense now. Like a lot of the 24th or 25th best players on your Dynasty team are never going to contribute anything to that team. Whereas picking up a defense that gets to face Jacoby Brissett this coming week or whatever it may be, that gets a great matchup, that's probably worth the 1 week spike versus maybe Tyler Johnson or Arian Smith, whatever. Maybe one of these types of players becomes something. They're probably not, but we do know this individual week or over the next few weeks, the Falcons have a really good 2-week schedule on defense. They're going to contribute to your roster.
Still got some questions to get to, but about 12, 15 minutes left. Have you been sitting on a question? Now's the time to get it in. We have 2 Steelers ones, Kyle. We'll start in the receiver core. Stevie points out Kenneth Gainwell scored more receiving fantasy points yesterday than DK Metcalf has in a game all year. That's pretty grim. That's actually does sound. I think it was 7 for 91. So,
oh my god,
that might be accurate. Maybe not depending on the format, but directionally accurate, as they might say in politics. Do we ride out DK Metcalf for the final 4 weeks, or do you bench him for someone like Trey Tucker, Darius Slayton, Parker Washington? It has been getting very grim for DK Metcalf in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Metcalf this year has been okay at earning targets, which is what he's been his whole career. Like, he has the physical archetype of a superstar alpha wide receiver 1, and he has the play style and the skill set of a 1A, 1B, like that Cortland Sutton type. And when you play on this Steelers team that all they want to do is check down gimmick stuff to their tight ends and running backs and occasionally draw up a touchdown for DK Metcalf, you can kind of survive on the touchdowns as a wide receiver 2. If Aaron Rodgers is missing any time, the touchdowns are not going to be there. And even if he is, you are solely dependent on like 4 for 45 in 1 games. I do think that, like, when I played Trey Tucker, I don't know about those. Oh, you said Sean Tucker. That would have been a fun one. I don't know about these players, but like the fact that I can have this conversation should at least tell us something about DK Metcalf. I would still take him over all three of these players rest of season, but like the outlook continues to grow bleaker for him.
I think I would just pray he hits one of his long scores. I feel like he's running a little cold on his long scores, and yeah, the Trey Tucker thing should be better than it has been, but Tyler Lockett might have just ended that, which is really frustrating. Darius Slayton could be an interesting one. He's week to week, though, right now. So who knows? Another Steelers question from Nate Deasy. When Jalen Warren plays again, do we think Kenneth Gainwell takes his value away? Jalen Warren swears his ankle injury is minor. It's now 2 for 2 this year. And then when Jalen Warren either missed a game or missed most of a game, Kenneth Gainwell kind of instantly went crazy in fantasy. I thought the first time they'd have a hard time on seeing that. They did for 1 week. They kind of shared reps when Jalen Warren came back, but then he took over basically everything the following week. What do we think right now if this has happened a second time in the Steelers backfield? Maybe they're growing reticent of putting everything on Jalen Warren's shoulders.
Yeah, I would say that they've showed us once what they're going to do. I will note that ever since the first Jalen Warren injury, like you said, they played around with the committee for 1 week, and ever since then, it's been all Jalen Warren between the tackles. Kenneth Gainwell over the past 2 weeks has dominated passing downs work. He's seen like 70 to 80% of the routes over the past 2 weeks. Obviously, you mentioned that he got to cash in on those routes in this past week. To me, that alone is a change from what we saw early in the season of the backfield split. And I think that at least would hold up, if not maybe also seed another carry or two to Kenneth Gainwell from Jalen Warren. I still think you would easily project a 65-35 type of split in the backfield. But the fact that the Jalen Warren pass catching role, which he should in theory be really good at, that's completely gone. And I don't think it's ever coming back. It will put him in that, Quinshon Judkins kind of range where, yeah, he's going to see every carry. Steelers, especially if Aaron Rodgers misses time, but even if he doesn't, they're not an electric offense. Like, I don't expect him to be a weekly RB2 when he's only getting carries on a very mediocre team. They're better than the Browns, but they're not an elite offense.
Okay, we have a very intriguing question. Someone offering cheap viewers on a streaming website. I'm going to get to that one in just a second. Joseph G, he's been here the whole show. We've missed a few of his questions. Now he's just wondering, is it Jover for the Bengals? Flacco, looks like that thing's kind of sputtering out a little bit. Burrow's trying to decide if he's going to come back and play. I think he's going to come back and play. Burrow's missed so much time with injury. Is he really going to pack it in down the stretch just because he wants to avoid further injury? I guess Burrow could be that kind of player.
I don't think he'd be doing it this soon specifically, though. Like, the thing was, It was always like when Aaron Rodgers did this garbage with the Achilles thing, he was like, if we make the playoff run, the Jets are like 2-9. And he's I'm going to be back if we make a playoff run, where like Burrow's targeting a return in week 15. They're a month away from the end of the season. It's probably like week 13 because it's 2 weeks from now, right? So yeah, he's targeting a week 13 return. Like, this is not him like playing coy, trying to look tough or whatever. If he's targeting that return, he probably does have a decent chance to play. I wouldn't really say it's over for Flacco. 14 days ago, he threw for 407 yards and 4 scores. He did shoulder. Yeah, maybe that is a thing now. Maybe the shoulder is just continually getting worse. I'm sure it can't really be getting better for him. But I will say, like, this is kind of what he does. He throws a lot of games that, good or not, have a lot of fantasy value to them. And also sometimes he still implodes because he's not that good. So I think we're still starting all of our Bengals per usual until, through the end of the year, because it's either going to be Flacco or Joe Burrow.
By the way, the Bengals play the Ravens Thanksgiving night on NBC. I would be shocked if Joe Burrow were not back by that game. I think we probably have one more game at most of Joe Flacco. It's been fun. It'll be sad when it's over, but don't cry because it's over. Laugh because it happened, or whatever the phrase is. Be happy it happened. More Flacco magic. They said it couldn't be done. Raul Ramesh. Hello, Raul. You're here almost every week, too. He's wondering if we play someone like Alec Pierce over Quinshon Judkins. Pierce, perennially underrated, both in real life and fantasy. He's just a wide receiver 4, though. I don't think I could play a wide receiver 4 over Quinshon Judkins, despite the very valid concerns we and Raul have about the Browns offense. Correct, Kyle?
Yeah, correct. I maybe have like a slightly higher opinion of Alec Pierce. He is the engine of their downfield passing game. He has 48% of their air yards. For every 1 air yard thrown, or I guess for every 2 air yards thrown by Daniel Jones, about one of them is an Alec Pierce air yard. There is almost no player in the NFL right now who's accounting for more of his team's air yards than Alec Pierce, his 20% target share is fine. It's very clear evidence that they love trying to get him going downfield. So even when he doesn't earn a lot of targets, it's a ton of high value looks. I think I'd probably throw him in the wide receiver 3 mix. I think he's probably a little better, just a little bit, than a wide receiver 4. I'm still starting Judkins over that guy, so I won't jump the shark here, but Alec Pierce is good.
Yeah, Alec Pierce is good. He should be more rostered than I still have no idea how he's under 50% rostered. Like, he should not be on the waiver wire right now. I had a question that took me a second to get, was a joke. Armando, I don't think I would do that. He's forecasting a Broncos Carolina Panthers Super Bowl. Armando, a very good viewer. J-Ram has AJ Brown unleashed the mummy's curse on the Eagles. Check out The Mummy if you've not already done so. Way back in the day, Brendan Fraser, I think it's already been remade. I think they remade it with Tom Cruise. Not a joke. Do we start fading AJ Brown, who did all that whining and pouting last week? I think it resulted in a season high 7 catches. Didn't really go anywhere. He kind of gave up on a few different plays. Like, it's talk about getting tedious. Like, this has gotten tedious with AJ Brown. What the heck do we do with AJ Brown? I mean, we're not probably benching AJ Brown. Is he a wide receiver 3 instead? Should be a wide receiver 1. He fell into the wide receiver 2 ranks. Is it getting so bad he's trending towards wide receiver 3? Let's say that.
I kind of think so. And I still am, but especially like in most cases, targets are an earned stat. Like, you're out there, you're getting targets. I want to be playing you. And he saw 44%, a season high, and like probably one of the highest of his career. It's a monster number of the team's targets. But as you pointed out, they made it a point to feed him the football. He scores less than a dozen PPR points, and he just has not looked as good, both in the film watcher's eyes and per the spreadsheets, as he has in any other year of his career. So the fact that he earned a bunch of targets and didn't do anything with them, I feel like is almost evidence to the fact that he's just not been as good this year than he has in any other year. Like, I think even despite clearly, in terms of targets, running circles around Devonta Smith this past game, I would still take Devonta Smith rest of season over him. Like, we've seen them up until
he's
last.
He's
been better. That's right.
He's still trying. He still wants to be there, which definitely matters for something. Metal Mask wondering, what level of confidence do we have in any Ravens rest of season? Yeah, that was a tough matchup for the Ravens yesterday. It still went even more poorly than I could have ever expected. How are you feeling about this? Let's say in particular, not that the rushing attack's even doing that well, but in particular, how are you feeling about the Ravens passing attack down the stretch, Kyle? The schedule remains very soft, I must say, like shockingly soft, I'll say, for the Ravens.
Yeah, I know, watching this game too, Lamar, much like exactly what happened the first time he got injured, you and Denny were both saying like it was versus the Lions. You're like, something looked off about Lamar in that game. And then he popped up, and then he ends up getting hurt. It seems like he aggravated whatever that issue was. He gets hurt, he comes back, and he starts to look good again. Then he pops up on the injury report, I believe, with what was they called a knee issue this week. And again, he just looked like skittish in the pocket. He turns 4 carries into 10 yards, took a ton of sacks against great Browns defense, but still one that Lamar's typically elusive enough to avoid more often than not. Plays, frankly, just a really poor game in general. I don't know, man. I am definitely starting to lose the faith a little bit, with maybe the positives being that they really just have a true wide receiver 1 in Zay Flowers and a touchdown-based tight end in Mark Andrews. And that's about it. Like, even when Rashad Bateman comes back, I'm not really going to be thinking too much about him. So you at least know who you're starting. And one other sort of positive development from the Browns game was that the run game got going. Derrick Henry averaged 5.7 yards per carry, runs for over 100 yards. Binoculars, Mark Andrews, 1 carry for 35 yards. Yeah. I saw the play, so I know what it is. But Keaton Mitchell averages over 5 yards per carry too. Like, maybe there's some balance where as the pass game struggles a little bit, they focus more on getting the run game going. But I don't think we're getting back to Death Star Ravens anytime soon. It seems like that ship has almost sailed.
It does seem like that ship has sailed, which is quite depressing. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Michael Haynes is wondering, can Jordan Addison get by the rest of the year as a final flex, or should he get desperate and look elsewhere? Jordan Addison and J.J. McCarthy were not helping each other out yesterday. Jordan Addison, some truly horrific drops. J.J. McCarthy, some misses that were almost as bad. Jordan Addison, a volatile player in the best of times in fantasy football, Kyle. How do we feel about treating Jordan Addison as a 12-team league starter right now?
Probably still a starter, even in a game in which he struggles, the offense struggles. He sees a healthy 23% target share. He sees half of the air yards, which is typical of Addison, maybe not literally half, but in the sense of he's always going to be this boom bust deep threat who outclasses his target share by his air yard share. He's still a starting fantasy player, but JJ McCarthy's been dreadful. I think he took Jordan Addison from a frustrating but fun wide receiver 2 to a deep cut, like wide receiver 3-4 border player, because Justin Jefferson can't even put up wide receiver 1 numbers with him. I don't know how we expect someone like Jordan Addison playing behind Justin Jefferson in the pecking order for targets to be a wide receiver 2, maybe even not a wide receiver 3. So I think he's still startable, but that's like all I can say at this point.
Ishmael, you should be adding Joe Burrow. I think he could start as early as this week. Armando is wondering, we have 2 final questions. Armando is wondering, we dropping Parker Washington now that Myers is a thing. Not only is Myers a thing, Brian Thomas Jr. probably back this week. Parker Washington, the kind of guy where the music tends to stop. He's kind of like a receiver K. Otten. How are you feeling about Parker Washington as wide receiver 4?
Yeah, very droppable. I mean, he drops to a 10% target share last week, which is what both you and I said exactly what happened. Once they get Jacoby Myers up and running, he's not an elite player, but he's more than capable of being a team's spot starter number 1, much more so than Parker Washington, who, like you said, they have to suffer injuries upon injuries to elevate Parker Washington to that role. Jacoby Myers will continue to play ahead of him. Brian Thomas Jr. obviously looks like he's going to come back this week. Very droppable to me.
We'll end, I think, maybe where we began, the Arizona Cardinals. Omar is wondering, what happens with Michael Wilson, one of the ads of the week, once Marvin Harrison Jr. comes back? Again, we think Marvin probably out this week. I wouldn't be shocked if he's out 2 more weeks, Kyle. But can Michael Wilson maintain relevance? Has one of the ultimate spiked weeks of the entire 2025 NFL season. Can he maintain relevance once MHJ is back?
I'm skeptical. He had a season high of 9.1 PPR points before Marv went down. Obviously, a lot of those games that I'm referring to came with Kyler under center, and Kyler's season high in passing yards was like 220 or something. So when I'm saying he had a season high of 9 points, it's because most of his previous season games came with worse quarterback play, especially for fantasy purposes. But can a distant wide receiver 2, and he's really the wide receiver 3 because Trey McBride's number 1, Marv will be the number 2. Can a distant wide receiver 3 make fantasy waves even with Jacoby Brissett under center? I don't know. And I think one of the assets of these like hired gun veterans is that they know who to throw it to. And it will be Marv. It will be Trey McBride. And I don't know if it will be Michael Wilson when he comes back. So I'm just going to say no.
I still say it'll be more targets than he ever gets with Kyler Murray.
Sure. Yeah.
Jacoby Brissett actually enjoys passing the football. So I'll say that about Michael Wilson. I'll say, too, I think next week's Thanksgiving week, I'm pretty sure we're doing the show, I think, the normal. So this podcast schedule is a little different next week. I'm pretty sure Kyle and I will be back with you at 1 p.m. Eastern on the NFL and NBC YouTube channel to answer your waiver wire questions. Denny and I will be podcasting on Tuesday on Kyle's article, Waiver Wires Live, Sunday Aftermath Live. We're around all week writing and podcasting. Sorry if we missed you today. We hope we get to you next Monday. So for Kyle and Pat, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating. We'll talk to you real soon.